If you're watching this, you're probably exhausted. You've tried all the productivity hacks, the morning routines, the time management apps. You've set boundaries, or at least you tried to, and you're still burned out. Here's what nobody's telling you. Your burnout has nothing to do with your to-do list. I'm Dr. Qaali Hussein. I'm a full-time double board certified trauma surgeon, and I'm also a mom of six. I've worked 30-hour shifts while pregnant. I've pumped breast milk in supply closets in between surgeries and still gotten interrupted. And I experienced burnout so severe, I've fallen asleep mid-sentence. And here's what I learned. Burnout is not a personal failure. It is a systemic problem. And until you understand what's really causing your problem, you're going to keep blaming yourself for something that is not your fault. Let me tell you what I see in medicine and as a burnout recovery coach for high achieving women. I see women physicians who are working over 80 hours be told they're not resilient enough when they burn out. I see working mothers who are doing the work of at least 2 to 3 people be told they need better time management. And I see people of color who have to be twice as good to get half as far be told they're not cut out when they finally break. This is a systemic problem, and it is by design. In this video, I'm going to show you 3 causes of burnout that nobody talks about and why they have nothing to do with your productivity or your discipline. You'll understand why the system is designed to burn you out and what you can actually control to protect yourself. Because here's the truth. You can't self-care your way out of a broken system. However, you can stop blaming yourself and start addressing the real problem. So let's break it down. First off, let me tell you what burnout is not. Burnout is not laziness. It is not poor time management. It is not a lack of discipline or resilience. And it's definitely not because you haven't tried hard enough. Burnout is what happens when you're operating in a system that demands more than it actually gives you. When the expectations are impossible and support is either very little or non-existent. And burnout happens when you're told to compete on equal terms, but you're playing by completely different rules. So if it's not your to-do list, what exactly is the cause of your burnout? After working with hundreds of burned out professionals and experiencing it myself, I've identified 3 systemic causes of burnout that show up over and over again. And once you understand these causes, everything will start to make sense and you will stop blaming yourself and understand the system for what it is. The first systemic cause of burnout is culture, specifically women in the workplace and our social expectations. Here's the truth. Women, especially mothers, have 2 full-time jobs. Let me explain. So women were recruited into the workforce back in the early 1900s. And with this recruitment into the workforce, there are a few things we forgot to change along the way, at home and in the workplace. As a working mother, whether part-time or full-time, at home, you're still expected to maintain 100% of your household responsibilities. Cooking, cleaning, childcare, school activities, homework, doctor's appointments, dentist appointments, parental care. You're still expected to carry it all, regardless of how much you work. So what happens? You work a full day, and then you come home to your second shift. And in the workplace, you're expected to perform as if you didn't have any responsibilities at home. So you go back to work the following day, still exhausted from the previous day's double shift, and you're expected to compete against colleagues who have a complete support system at home handling all that for them. So you work the same hours as your colleagues, you meet the same standards, and still get paid less because we still have a wage gap. And you're told to break the glass ceiling even though you're barely surviving. Because the workplace, which was originally designed for men, never changed to accommodate your needs as a woman. Not even our most basic biology. Did you know that it took over 100 years for there to be workplace protections for nursing mothers? 100 years for there to be protections and a facility for nursing mothers to pump breast milk. This is why in my training, I was pumping breast milk in supply closets in between cases because there was no designated space. So in between carrying all the responsibility at home and trying to navigate a workplace that doesn't even acknowledge our basic biology, our basic motherhood. It's no wonder that women are more burned out than men. That's what this Canadian study has showed, which is linked in the description. And the most cruel part of all of this is when you can't do both perfectly, you're the problem. Instead of addressing the underlying problem of the double standards and unreasonable expectations, you're told you need better time management. You need to be more organized. You need to be more resilient. No, you're being held to 2 completely different standards at the same time. And that's not a personal failure. That's a cultural system that demands women perform at work like they have no responsibilities at home while also maintaining their homes like they don't have a job. And it's literally impossible. The second systemic cause of burnout is lack of support. And I mean both at home and at work. Let's start with home. Because social expectations never changed when women entered the workforce, there was never so much as a discussion or the action of dividing the labor at home. Women were still expected to carry it all. And when we did, we got an honorary title for our efforts, and we were called superwomen. And this added yet another unbelievably high standard we were expected to meet. So if you wanted a career and a family, guess what you had to become? You had to become a superwoman. You had to have superhuman abilities. And seeking help can be seen as a sign of weakness or a sign that you're neglecting your primary responsibilities. The most common question I get asked when people find out I have 6 children, and yes, I do work full time as a trauma surgeon, is who takes care of them? Do you know how many of my male surgeon colleagues who also happen to have large families get asked the same question? Zero. None of them. And for a long time, this question used to irritate me. But after working with so many women and hearing their same stories over and over and over, I realized that this is actually one of the main reasons women burn out. This question isn't coming from a bad place. It's actually rooted in a deep belief that comes from our cultural norms and expectations. And that is the fact that as a mother, you are the default parent. So, if you choose a non traditional career that requires more hours, then the obvious question that follows is what happened to your second full time job? I've actually been asked that. How many hours do you have in your day? And you're asked, how do you possibly do both? The automatic assumption is that you continue to carry on both responsibilities. There's never an assumption that you share the load, but there's always an assumption that you carry both somehow. This belief and this social expectation, this is why when I was in residency and I put my kids in daycare and went back to work, I experienced so much backlash. And I was actually called a bad mother for many years. So instead of calling out the unreasonable expectations to do it all, women are targeted for seeking help. This is one of the most common challenges I see in helping working mothers overcome burnout. They have the resources to get the help they need, but they hesitate because of the potential backlash. And now let's talk about the support gap in the workplace. So, what does lack of support in the workplace look like? Instead of providing support structures like flexible work schedules or paid maternity leave, women are forced to fit into unwelcoming workplaces. For example, when I first became pregnant in my surgery residency, asking for maternity leave policy was the most eye-opening experience I've ever had. The reality was there was no such thing. The program has never had a maternity leave policy because the unspoken rule was that women didn't get pregnant in the program, and if they did, they left. So the expectation was that you sacrifice and put your biological clock on hold, or you left the workplace. There was never a support system to change the workplace to accommodate the biology of women. And so, in navigating these unwelcoming environments, we're forced to do unreasonable things like coming back to work 2 weeks postpartum. That's right, I've done that twice. Don't recommend it. And what makes this lack of support in the workplace so frustrating is that it has been so normalized that women have internalized this as acceptable. I had a senior resident tell me 2 weeks postpartum that I couldn't request any time off because I had just come back from vacation. I had just delivered 2 weeks prior, and another female physician told me that I had come back from vacation. So when the support systems that should exist, such as childcare, paid leave, flexible work schedule, do not, you compensate by working harder, sleeping less, and sacrificing your own needs until you no longer can. And the third systemic cause of burnout is a hostile workplace. And I'm not just talking about obvious harassment. I'm talking about psychological unsafety, environments where you face daily microaggressions and sometimes blatant discrimination, where you have to pay the minority tax. You know what I'm talking about, where you have to work twice as hard to get half as far. And you can't just be competent, you have to be exceptional. And where speaking up actually puts a bigger target on your back for retaliation. And where the power structure is so rigid that speaking up can actually cost you your career. I've watched doctors work through an illness because they were too scared to call in sick. I've seen physicians berate trainees in front of their colleagues and their patients. And I've experienced being the only woman in the room where my clinical judgment and my surgical skills have been questioned. That's not burnout from working hard. That's trauma from working in a toxic environment. And here's the thing about burnout that comes from navigating a hostile workplace. You can't self-care your way out of a hostile workplace. There's no amount of meditation or boundary setting that will fix a broken system. And the frustrating thing is we continue to keep our heads in the sand about this in the workplace. We don't talk about it. There is a culture of silence. Even in circles that are supposed to talk about this, such as diversity, equity, and inclusion, will not talk about the real consequences of navigating hostile workplaces. I remember going to a women in medicine conference where the topic was diversity, equity, and inclusion. And when I asked the question of how do we deal with burnout coming from a hostile workplace, the keynote speaker told me that she does not do race. She focused solely on women in the workplace and their salary gaps and their wage gaps and research gaps and award gaps. But the real impact of navigating a hostile workplace and the mental health impact that it has on us is not something that is openly discussed. And that is why it continues to be a hidden cause of burnout that nobody wants to talk about. So when you're faced with cultural and social expectations and you have lack of support and you're navigating a hostile workplace, no wonder you're burned out. So what do? You push harder, you say yes to everything, you never show weakness, and you think this is all in your head and that you're the only person experiencing it. But the reality is, we are all going through this and we are all experiencing it in silos because we're also operating under a culture of silence where we don't talk about these issues. So here's what you can fix. You can't fix social culture and expectations overnight. You can't single-handedly create a support system, and you can't always leave a hostile workplace immediately. But you can start by naming what's actually happening. Right now, I want you to pause this video and ask yourself, which of these three causes is affecting me mostly right now? Is it the cultural pressure, the double standard to perform in the workplace like you have no responsibilities at home and perform at home like you have no career? Is it the lack of support both at home and in the workplace, making you do everything on your own while your mind and your body scream for help? Or is it a toxic workplace that is draining you day by day? Write it down, even if it's more than one, because awareness is the first step to strategy. If it's culture, you need to actively challenge the internalized messages. Practice saying your best is good enough. And please do me a favor and stop competing with people, especially your male colleagues who have an entire support system behind them. If it's lack of support, you need to identify one area where you can ask for help or even outsource, even if it feels uncomfortable. And if it's a hostile workplace, think of an exit strategy. Even if it takes time, start by documenting, building your network, and planning your next move. The relief comes when you stop blaming yourself and start addressing the real causes of your burnout. Now, identifying the cause is just the beginning. The next step is building your personalized recovery roadmap, and that's exactly what we're going to do in the next video. I'm going to walk you through my 5-step burnout recovery roadmap that I've used with hundreds of professionals. And I can tell you this, it is not generic advice. We talk about the real issues. We talk about the taboo topics nobody else talks about. We talk about the real causes of burnout. And we help you build a strategic framework for protecting yourself while you navigate broken systems. And if you want to hit the ground running and start implementing these strategies, then you can join the burnout community at the link below. So subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications so you don't miss our next video. And leave a comment below and tell me which of these causes resonates with you the most. Is it culture? Is it lack of support? Or a hostile workplace?